Hello, friends. I have our last chapter in this incredible journey of Laura Ingalls Wilder's family. It's called A Little Prairie House. Once upon a time, a little girl named Laura traveled in a covered wagon across the giant prairie. She traveled with her pa, her ma, her big sister Mary, her little sister Carrie, and their good old bulldog Jack. They were searching for the perfect place to build themselves a little home. It had been a very long journey. One day after the little family had been traveling across the prairie for a long time, Laura and Mary woke up earlier than the sun. They ate their breakfast of cornmeal mush and hurried to help Ma wash the dishes. Pa was loading everything into the wagon. When the sun rose, they were driving across the prairie. There was no road to drive on, so Pet and Patty, the two gentle Mustangs, waded through the grasses. Later that morning, Pa said, "Woo!" and the wagon stopped. "Here we are," he said. "Right here we build our house." Laura and Mary jumped to the ground. All around them was nothing but prairie. Right away, Pa and Ma began to unload the wagon. They took everything out and piled it on the ground while Laura and Mary and Jack watched. Then Pa drove the wagon down into the prairie out of sight to get a load of logs from the creek bottom. Time to build their home. Laura was a little frightened to be left on the prairie without the wagon. She wanted to hide in the tall grass like a little prairie chicken, but instead she helped Ma while Mary sat on the grass and minded baby Carrie. Soon Pa came back with a load of logs. For days and days, Pa kept hauling logs. He made 2 piles of them, one for the house and one for the stable. When he had enough logs, it was time to build. Pa began the house first. All by himself, Pa built the walls of the house 3 logs high, and then Ma helped him. Log by log, Pa and Ma built the walls higher and higher. Soon Laura couldn't climb over them anymore. Then one day Pa was off hunting and he came home whistling merrily. "Good news!" he shouted. Pa had met a neighbor on the other side of the creek. His name was Mr. Edwards, and he was going to help Pa finish building the house. Then Pa would help Mr. Edwards build his house. That's what neighbors do. They help each other. Early the next morning, Mr. Edwards came over. He was long, tall, and lean, and he bowed to Ma politely. He told Laura he was a wildcat from Tennessee, and he could spit further than Laura had ever imagined anyone could spit. Laura tried and tried, but she could never spit so far or so well as Mr. Edwards could. It's a rare talent. Mr. Edwards was a fast worker. In one day, he and Pa built the walls of the little house as high as Pa wanted them. They sang while they worked, and their axes made the chips fly. They cut a tall hole for the door and square holes for the windows. Laura couldn't wait to see the inside of the house. And as soon as the tall hole was cut, she ran inside. Stripes of sunshine came through the cracks in the walls and went all across Laura's hands and arms and feet. At the end of the day, Mr. Edwards said he would go home, but Pa and Ma said he must stay to supper. Mom had made stewed jackrabbit and steaming hot thick cornbread with molasses. Mr. Edwards said he surely did appreciate that supper. Then Pa took out his fiddle and began to sing. The best part of the evening. Suddenly, Mr. Edwards jumped up and began to dance. He danced like a jumping jack in the moonlight while Pa's fiddle kept on rollicking and Laura's and Mary's hands were clapping together. Pa played and played, and Mr. Edwards danced and danced. Finally, Mr. Edwards said he must go. "Play me down the road," he said. So Pa played, and Pa and Laura and Mr. Edwards sang with all their might until Laura could not hear Mr. Edwards anymore. Only the wind rustled in the prairie grasses, and the big yellow moon sailed high over the new little house on the prairie. I encourage your families to check out the large chapter books, the 8 different books in the Little House in the Big Woods series. You can read a chapter a day and become a part of Laura's family as they travel from Wisconsin to Missouri and the Dakotas, and join in the fun and sometimes challenging parts of their adventures. Remember, these stories represent our shared history. Our ancestors traveled these pathways and did many of the same things to create the states that grew out of the prairie and westward all the way to California, Oregon, and Washington, the Oregon Trail. It's really fun to explore our shared history, and these stories make it so exciting for us to join in the voyage of adventure. I hope you enjoy these stories and will take the time to write your stories about your families and make scrapbooks about your adventures to share with your family and friends. Till next time, I'll see you later.